Hi, this is Jeremy again, Bridgeport, Connecticut target. This is part 5 of sleep deprivation and gangstalking. And this time I'd like to talk about two things. The rotation or the lineup that I think I mentioned in previous videos, and also the typical night. What I mean by the rotation is the group of people who are signed into the system on any given night and who are waiting to perform sleep deprivation techniques such as I described earlier, the 4 steps or more. I'm saying that there's a minimum of 4. In that first scenario, I guess I tried to describe at least 2 hypothetical members of this rotation. I mentioned before, it also, at least in the sleep deprivation mode, it almost is like a baseball game where one person is at bat at a time, and there seems to be a queue of people waiting for their turn. The typical night, and by typical I don't mean a heavy activity night where I'm not allowed to sleep at all. That overtime is impractical because they do need you to function, and to be functioning, you are their resource. They control people through you, they influence people through you, the target, and they also make money off of you. So the typical night, I should say the average night, I'll go to bed between 9 and 10 o'clock, and they'll usually DOI me as I'm trying to get to sleep. If you think about it as just a form of power, being able to decide when another human being is allowed to go to sleep. And the folks online, on social media, they congratulate themselves and they think it's quite a democratic process that they get together and can decide that, for example, you will not be going to sleep before 10:30 p.m. or until they feel, after 3, 4, 5 DOIs, such as I described earlier, after 3, 4, 5 of these DOIs, they want to feel that they've dominated you. They want to feel generous when they finally say, okay, let him go to sleep. Just let him go to sleep, poor little baby. We're just messing around anyway. Everyone who's a gangstalking target knows this mentality, by the way. Once I am asleep on this average night, I'm usually allowed a block of 3 to 4 hours on average. I think that they may have arrived at this number, 3 to 4 hours, because I was told by someone that's the minimum of sleep that you need to function. So they want to affect you with sleep deprivation, but they don't want to take you out of commission because you're a valuable resource, like I said just earlier. And part of me likes to believe that there's some compassionate element out there among the spectators of this activity, because we're not just talking about perps and targets anymore. That's old school gangstalking, and gangstalking 2.0, which I'm going to be getting into. Social media is the most important aspect, and they turn the experience into a multimedia interactive extravaganza that runs 24 hours a day. And that's part of how they're able to get people to carry out these barbaric acts, these un-American acts. Where we're looking at not simply obedience to authority, but we also get people who are looking for respect, admiration, 15 minutes of fame, or who knows, $20. Once I do get that 3 to 4 hour block on the average night, it could be more, it could be less, that's when usually all hell breaks loose. That's when you're pretty much fair game for whoever wants to come out and get their kicks and their thrills. such as I described in that first video. The garbage truck driver and the young man smoking a cigarette. There's also something I call final wake up, and that basically is the time, just like when they decided when you were allowed to sleep, it's the time when they decide that you're going to wake up, and after that point you are not to fall back asleep. It's also obviously a power thing. And if you think about it, if what they're doing with this program is trying to create an open air prison, well, what more effective way than to start with, at the very, the basic part of it, to start with letting the target know that they decide when you're awake and when you're asleep, and not the other way around. It's a very, very basic form of power that's at the heart of this whole mess called gangstalking. When that final wake-up mode starts, boy, let me tell you, you are not to go back to sleep. And that's when the rotation gets really heavy, really aggressive. Back to the rotation, I just want to say a couple more words about that. If we're looking at this average night that I briefly sketched out here, let's just say for the sake of argument, maybe we got 6 people in our rotation. So we saw the first 2, perhaps, in this other video, video 1 of the series, the scenario. Well, who might come after our second guy in the rotation? And who might he pass the baton electronically to? Well, it could be any number of kinds of people. You notice that in those 2 examples in this scenario, neither one of them were law enforcement. Neither one of them were agents of any kind. They were just ordinary people who've been given access, or who are in contact with someone who has access. Remember the last video, to this technology that is a joy to use. That's what makes it so dangerous. So let's say, for the sake of argument, after our young man smoking a cigarette drives away, the next vehicle to show up is an ambulance. And they pull up nearby, maybe a block or 2 away. And the next DOI is a brief 1-second ambulance siren. And then after the ambulance departs, let's say our 4th person in the rotation is a pedestrian. The guy is probably sitting in the train station late at night. Maybe he signs in and gets into the queue. He volunteers. He walks the couple blocks from the train station to where I sleep. And maybe what he chooses to do for his DOI is to pretend to talk really, really loud on his phone. He comes up, he stands 3 feet away from me and starts screaming into his phone for his DOI. So this is a way, if you haven't been able to tell by now, it's a way for people to express themselves in a negative sense, but it's self-expression. They seem to be able to use their creativity to come up with different ways. So that's our 4th person. Let's say our 5th person in this hypothetical rotation or lineup is going to be a train driver. And let's say we have a train that just happens to be at the station. They know that I'm starting to fall back asleep after the guy screamed into his phone. And so one of the guys on the train is in the queue. He's up, and he uses the horn or the whistle on the train. This may sound far-fetched to you, but anyone could be signed in. They don't have to be standing right next to me. and let's say we got one more wake up before the target decides to get up and out of there. Maybe it's after 4 o'clock now, and I usually leave my location where I sleep between 4 and 5. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that the final person in the rotation is going to be someone at a remote location who's going to use voice to skull at the exact moment that I'm about to fall asleep. So there's our 6-man team or 6-person team, and I wanted to make sure that you understand that they mix and match all different types of vehicles, different methods. They don't simply have a guy banging on the side of a garbage can every single time. They seem to like to mix it up and to do as many different things, to do the DOI as many different ways as they can within a single night. So for my next video, I'm going to get into a little bit about who these guys in the rotation are. In other words, if we could take this 6-man, hypothetical 6-person team, and we could look into their lives a little bit, who would we see? Would we see that they're all career criminals who are getting paid $20 an hour to do this? Would we find fine, upstanding citizens? If you're not familiar with the psychology of gang stalking, you might be shocked at who we will actually find in this sleep deprivation rotation on the average night.